Hello and welcome back to F1 Isn't Real. I am your host, Ben Wevel, part-time rickshaw driver, joined as ever by my right-hand man, Amesh, aka V1. And today, we are going to preview this weekend's upcoming Chinese GP, as well as asking some of the boldest F1 what's more likely questions that have ever been proposed later in the episode. Amesh, how's it going? Good weekend?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It's always a pleasure to be back on the show. I'm very excited for the first Chinese Grand Prix in 5 years.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? COVID, of course, proving quite, things that get in the way of proceedings at the Chinese Grand Prix for quite some time. How significant is it, I think, that we're returning to China with a Chinese driver on the grid, Joe Guan?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have races everywhere in the world. I think having a second race in East Asia is definitely beneficial, especially considering it's a world championship. I think with going ahead, having this race in China might promote F1 to extend their horizons to other countries other than America and Europe, which is always great to see. And I'm very looking forward to see what this weekend holds before us.
But picking up on your point there, of course, we're going to be speaking about the Chinese Grand Prix today, but we're returning to a country that was really the sort of gateway for, of course, apart from Japan, but it was the gateway for modern Formula One into the Middle Eastern and the Asian markets. Of course, after that, after China's edition, we saw Bahrain, we saw Singapore, we saw obviously South Korea and Malaysia, which didn't last so long. But China sort of opened the floodgates here. If of course, even for example, countries like Vietnam, they were going to have a Formula One Grand Prix on the calendar in 2020. Of course, that was cancelled due to COVID, and it's never returned. But if you would predict any new country that would be added to the list of countries that Formula One is trying to expand to, where do you think Formula One is going to be shifting their interest to in the coming years?
I think if Formula One does some listening to its fans, um, I would like to see South Africa and Kyalami back on the calendar. We haven't raced there in what 40 years, so I think it'd be great to have South Africa back in the calendar. But as to the country which would be most likely to make a return, I would say I would say Germany with either the Nürburgring or the Hockenheimring because we have been there in the past, and I think now it's time to make a comeback.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Europe is and Europe and South Africa and these older racetracks are certainly sort of areas that Formula One wants to dive back into. But I think in terms of sort of international markets, that there's no bigger international market at the moment, obviously than the US, but I think possibly somewhere where F1 could really make a statement in the coming years could be in China. I think, there are whispers of them sort of planning to add sort of three-ish sort of paralleling in a parallel to the American expansion, that level of presence in China, and that in itself could create a market for Formula One in more East Asian countries than before, and possibly bring back countries such as India, countries such as Malaysia, countries such as Vietnam back into the Formula One zeitgeist. But of course, that remains to be seen, and this is the first Chinese Grand Prix in 5 years, so nothing is proven yet. And so that's why I think this Chinese Grand Prix, just in terms of a political perspective from the FIA, is going to be integral because if you have a huge crowd, if you have a super exciting race, then that means that governments Officials are more likely to give planning permission to new racetracks that may be built. You will have tourist sort of boards who are going to put Formula One at the top of their priority as sort of, come to Shanghai and watch the F1. And so I think it could be a really important Grand Prix, not just for obviously the 2024 Formula One World Championship, but for the future of the sport. But that sort of hinges on the quality of the race circuit, in my opinion. I mean, the Shanghai International Circuit, it's been a bit of a ghost town these last few years, of course, with no Formula One races. The only major sporting events, motorsporting events since the pandemic being the Porsche Carrera Cup, GT World Challenge, and a Formula E race. Do you think that the track will need to be sort of broken in, or will it feel ready to race straight away?
I think it's a difficult question. We don't know what's going to happen then. I mean, I think it would definitely be beneficial to have other series racing on the track prior to the Chinese Grand Prix. But I think it would be better to leave it as it is now than to newly surface the track. If we look in the past, I think it was the Portuguese Grand Prix of 2020, cars were slipping and sliding everywhere. And I
Yeah,
think,
Turkey, I
no,
think.
it was Turkey. It was
Yeah.
Turkey, sorry, not Portuguese. Turkey, my bad. And I think that definitely makes racing more interesting. But at the same time, driver safety is a lot more important. And it will, I think it will be a rather neutral race. I think because with new regulations as well, we don't really know what's going to happen going ahead into this Chinese Grand Prix.
Speaking of the sort of the new aspects that need to be brought into China, what modifications or upgrades do you think that the teams may need to bring to this circuit in order to, have some kind of competitive advantage? Is there anything in particular that you would say is important for teams?
Well, I mean, starting from the back of the grid, Haas have brought in some new upgrades. I'm not quite sure what it is. I think it's a general technical upgrade. I think they have been sort of lacking in recent racing races. I think with Nico Hulkenberg nearly scoring points last weekend, and I think they definitely need these sorts of upgrades to give them a competitive edge going into this weekend. Also, unfortunate to say that this is a backmarker team now. Alpine have brought in some upgrades, I think, with their floor. And I think that will, I'm not sure whether that will give them much benefit. I think unless it's an integral part of the car, which is lacking. We don't really know yet. I don't even think the team know where they're going wrong. So it's too early to say. But I think hopefully these upgrades will give the lower ends of the grid upper hand going into this race.
Do you think that Alpine will be able to, speaking of Alpine, do you think that Alpine will be able to utilize these sort of 2 week breaks and maybe the summer break eventually? Do you think they'll be able to crack their way back into the midfield, or are they firmly in the back marker position for now?
I think another thing is too early to say, but you can't close off the opportunity or the possibility of Alpine making a comeback. We saw the same thing with McLaren last year and maybe even the year before. They had a really poor start to the season, and then by the time the summer break came, they were scoring podiums and high points, and were taking home a lot of points every weekend in and weekend out. So I think it's not easy to say whether it's guaranteed to happen, but you can't close off the opportunity or the possibility of it happening for Alpine. I think if anything, it puts more pressure or more emphasis on how well they can work as a team. We were all expecting such a great driver lineup with Ocon and Gasly being two Frenchmen in a French team. But I think this position that Alpine have been put in definitely highlights or puts a lot of pressure on their ability to work as a team outside of driving.
I think you've touched on a really important point there. I think going into this partnership that Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, the assumption was that these were two high-class drivers nearing their years of peaking, I guess. And I think even though the animosity between the two, between Pierre and Esteban, has subsided over the years, probably from the fact that they're not children anymore. Of course, there's a rivalry in terms of just racecraft, but I think the boyhood rivalry may have slightly subsided as the two drivers have got more mature. But the point you make is about teamwork, and that's been a real struggle of Alpine over the years. We've mentioned on previous pods, they've been through so many team principals, so many heads of the establishment and advisors, even someone like Alan Prost walking out of when they were back as Renault the year before they changed to Alpine. I think the real issue with Alpine may be, of course, on the track, they're not bringing things together, but just they are the lack of cohesion between the integral parts of the Alpine team has been really stark these last few years. What do you think Alpine need to implement in order to perhaps turn their fortunes around and bring the team closer together?
I think it's it would be easy to say bring in new management, but as you just said, Alpine have been going through a rough streak with the number of heads that they had come in and just walk out straight away or in quick succession. I think as to what they can do from now to improve improve the team and resurrect their chances of success this season, I I would say there has to be more change internally within the team, within within how the chemistry of the team. I'm not sure what department particularly. Um, I'm not going to say it's to do with the drivers. I think the driver pairing is fine. I think the problem Alpine are facing at this current moment is definitely the situation with their car. The car is definitely not in the right place where it should be, and the sooner Alpine are able to recognize a technical problem or a mechanical issue that they have, they can see some improvement. But as to how they can do that, I think it's got to be within their research and development team, working with their current engineering team who are developing the car parts.
I think I agree with you in part. Um, I agree with the fact that the R&D team needs to step up and give the drivers that are in the Alpine cars something to work with. But the fact is that although the performance of the Alpine car has certainly fallen off since the 2020 season, I think that all things considered, I would probably use the word hype in this case, that the partnership of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly brought, they've disappointed compared to that. I mean, we've had an Esteban Ocon victory, we've had I believe, an Esteban Ocon podium in Monaco, and then we had a Pierre Gasly, we had an Esteban Ocon podium in Qatar. We had a Pierre Gasly podium. God, I can't remember exactly. I think it might have been
Netherlands,
Spain, Netherlands. Thank you.
the
Yeah, so
Netherlands.
we've had three podiums. We've had a win. But as Marcin Budkowski was saying a few years ago, they expected to be fighting at the front in sort of the next 2 years, in the next two seasons. And at the moment, that is really not coming to fruition whatsoever. And of course, that's due down to the R&D team, but also I think the driver pairing for all of the praise that they garnered in the years prior have not quite lived up to their expectations as a quality partnership, even when Alpine was prominently within that midfield. They were, I believe, 10th and 11th back-to-back years, and that's consistency for sure, but it's nothing